tuned in for a cleaner future with Pollution Evolution.
We are your hosts,
Faith
and Kimberly.
To follow us along on this journey, you can listen to us every Saturday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. And if you would like to follow us along on our socials, we've recently introduced some new weekly segments on our Instagram, and they're called Tales from the Trenches. So every Sunday and Monday, we're going to cover real life stories from our listeners and people around the world to share their pollution stories. We have What a Wonderful Wednesday, which is going to cover good environmental news. We have Freaky Friday, which is the opposite of What a Wonderful Wednesday. And then we have Silly Saturdays, which are going to be clips and posts from the pod. And then every other post we're going to make is going to be educational content and or more information on Saucin.
Mm-hmm. So today we wanted to talk about Superfund sites. We are on episode 13 on cleanup on Isle Earth. And as many of you, well, I don't know if everybody knows, I don't know if this is common knowledge, but Superfund sites affect global, on a global scale. They are large sites that are contaminated with hazardous waste. And there are certain methods that you go through whenever you distinguish a site is at this level.
Mm-hmm.
And so today we want to go into a deeper dive, give you an explanation of what they are, give some examples, and also some cleanup efforts that have been done.
Yeah. So in the 1970s, national attention in the U.S. was brought to hazardous waste and improper disposal. The sites that had this required long-term, extensive, very expensive cleanup efforts. As of May 7th, 2025, there's currently 1,905 Superfund sites on the National Priorities List, which is designated by the Environmental Protection Agency. 39 additional sites have been proposed, and 457 sites have been cleaned up or removed. These sites include manufacturing facilities, processing plants, landfills, mining sites, and military areas. In the 1980s, Congress sought to clean up these sites, and they introduced the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, or CERCLA, on December 11, 1980. So the EPA is actually the people that seek to enforce these rules and regulations. And they said under CERCLA that it established prohibitions and requirements concerning closed and abandoned hazardous waste sites. It provided for liability of persons responsible for release of hazardous waste at these sites, and it also established a trust fund to provide cleanup when no responsible party could be identified. The law authorized two types of responses for cleanup efforts, long-term and short-term. Short-term removals are actions that can be taken to address releases or threaten releases that require prompt responses. And a long-term remedial response action is something that permanently or significantly reduces the dangers associated with the releases or threats of release of hazardous substances that are serious but not immediately life-threatening. And all of these actions can only be conducted at sites listed on the EPA's National Priorities List. And this list is going to be available for our users to use. You guys can go scroll it and look at all the things on the NPL and also see if there's Superfund sites in your areas. Mm-hmm. And so now let's talk about places specific to the U.S. that have been affected. So our first one is Love Canal. And Kim, we learned about Love Canal in class, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was severely polluted.
Mm-hmm.
It was discharged from one of these facilities,
yeah.
Right? And as you can expect, it affected a ginormous amount of people because it was on an entire canal.
Mm-hmm. Our next affected area is called the Valley of the Drums. And it gets this name because it is literally a valley filled with drums of hazardous waste.
Yeah.
And then we also have the Bandera Road groundwater plume in Bexar County, Texas, and Old Esco Manufacturing in Greenville, Texas. And there are thousands of these places, as we mentioned earlier. We just listed a couple of examples and some that are specific to Texas because that's where we live. But if you would like to know more about the Superfund sites in your region or even in your backyard, like I said, you can use the National Priorities List to help identify these. And so with all of this, by 2035, the EPA predicts that 350,000 of the nation's toxic waste sites will need remediation. So in 10 years, guys, 350,000 toxic waste sites.
across the
remediation.
United States.
And imagine, like, there's multiple in every state.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine, like, the proximity to that you live.
Yeah. So before we get into environmental and health impacts, I wanted to talk about how this is going to affect, like, economically. So as I mentioned, Superfund sites are massive.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a massive cost associated with them. In a 2011 article, it was estimated that the EPA had allocated $243 million per year from 2000 to 2010 to Superfund cleanup. And over the next couple of years, they're estimating that cleanup can go up to $335 to $681 million per year to clean up all of these sites. And that's not even with the $350,000 estimated yet.
No.
Like,
but that's not being considered yet.
Yeah. And whenever they classify these sites, they actually require them to report some things. So one of those is the toxicity of the hazardous substances. And it's used to establish its Superfund reportable quantities. So if a substance is released into the environment with an amount equal to or greater than their reportable quantity, the release must be reported to the federal government. But here's where it gets tricky. So many times when a cleanup occurs or somebody is designated they have to clean up their site, the company that uses that site or was functioning at that site can oftentimes declare bankruptcy. You don't have the money to clean it up, you don't have to be there, you're no longer working there, it doesn't matter to you. So essentially that leaves all the EPA to pay those fees, and so that's where those $243 million per year is coming from. And on the other hand, there are companies who do their part to do their own cleanup efforts. The pitfall here is that they do not require them to report their costs to the EPA. So if you're not reporting your costs, how are you remediating your area to a safe level, and how can you ensure that that's being done?
Mm-hmm, exactly, because it's not just about the money. These techniques and cleaning things are very expensive to remediate these areas. So, like, if you're only showing like $1 million, then that makes me wonder, like, how are you cleaning this? What technology are you using? And if you have such a cheap technology, why haven't you shared it with the EPA?
Mm-hmm.
It raises a lot of questions of transparency and efficacy, and I feel like a lot of things in the environmental world kind of have to do with this. There's a lot of loopholes.
Oh yeah, there always seems to be a loophole somewhere that exists that somebody mistakenly or on purpose put in there, and in some way or another it is helping the industry to continue to pollute these areas, to continue to make these things worse and develop Superfund sites.
Like cap and trade. That's a great example of a loophole, or carbon credits, or just so many ways that, like, it doesn't fully address the actual root cause of it. It just puts a band-aid on it. Yeah. So these sites have actually caused long-lasting environmental degradation and harm to the areas. Climate change specifically poses a unique risk to Superfund sites, as natural disasters such as flooding, hurricanes, anything water or wind related that's going to cause massive infrastructure damage, seismic activity as well. Like, I mean, all of them really can cause damage to already cleared sites or sites that have not undergone remediation. So an example of this is in 2017, we had a horrible hurricane hit Texas. It is called Hurricane Harvey, and it completely destroyed a concrete cap at a Superfund site. And when that water rushed through and beat the cap, because that's essentially what happened, the force of the hurricane was so strong it could break through the concrete. It actually caused cancerous substances to spread into the San Jacinto River. And
So the San Jacinto River, I actually worked alongside this river whenever I was doing my time in Houston researching, and I frequently saw people fishing out of this river. And one day, my advisor was there for a publicity shoot, and she noticed people fishing, and she made an offhanded comment of, "I would rather smoke a cigarette than eat a fish out of that lake or out of that river." And I never got it until Faith told me that fact. Like, they're actually ingesting fish that has cancerous substances in it because they are none the wiser.
Yeah, and as we talked about bioaccumulation many times on pollution evolution, that's why it's so dangerous, because the dose that the fish are getting is just being magnified within us. So we're getting a much higher rate of that cancer-causing substance. And that's why climate change is such a big concern for Superfund sites, because even if you do all this cleanup and remediation, what does it matter if a massive, like, flood that we have never seen before, because each year the hurricanes are more unprecedented, more like
everything just gets worse.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just like, how can we plan for that? Like, how can we ensure that the residents that live in those areas are going to be safe if flooding hits, if a fire hits, if seismic activity hits? And I don't feel like we can right now, because we don't know exactly how climate change is going to affect everything. And so with that, let's look at the way some Superfund sites can affect overall ecosystems. So the very first and most important thing is soil contamination. So leaching heavy metals and toxins can come out from a lot of these areas. We spoke ad nauseum about heavy metals in our last week's episode, but to just remind you guys, that includes lead, iron, cobalt, magnesium, things like that. And these things will completely degrade soil quality and make it unable for food to be grown, plants to be grown. And those plants, animals rely on them. We rely on them. It's very important. And another issue is water quality degradation. Any hazardous substance entering a water body is going to cause pollution, but at the extreme rates at which we see, it's a foregone conclusion. The water quality is going to degrade unless we clean and remediate those areas and stop the source of pollution.
Yeah.
And we also have air quality degradation, which follows the same idea. And this hazardous waste can also impact nutrient cycling. So that's the way that carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and any other essential nutrient cycles throughout the entire planet. And when those global streams and cycles get cut off, it disrupts the entire balance of everything, not even just one ecosystem, all ecosystems. And we're seeing that now because the carbon cycle is increasing, and like that's the ramification of changing nutrient cycles is those increased warming, all of those things. So that's why we want to keep those nutrient cycles at homeostasis. And we also get changes in our water cycle and other important processes. So as we can see, like, this is an ecosystem planetary wide issue. It's not just going to affect one area. These hazardous waste can get into our groundwater, our air, our soil, and transport and travel.
Yeah.
And another issue is loss of biodiversity. So whenever you do not have clean air, water, and soil, and you also have habitat loss due to widespread contamination and remediation efforts, animals lose their homes. And that means there's less biodiversity available in those areas. So it's just like this ripple effect.
Yeah, it affects everybody. Like, it's not just, like, even if it starts out just affecting the tiniest microorganisms whenever they're first starting to dump, once you start dumping at that magnitude that you're enlisted on the national priorities list as a Superfund site, like, you have contaminated it to the point where people have already noticed there are fish dying in the lake. Like, people have already seen the sludge going into the lake. Like, it's to the point where it's visible.
Yeah, and people have reported on it and have gotten sick in the land. Like, I don't know if you guys know, but if things are designated Superfund site, you can't live in the Superfund site. Like, that's not... It's, like, not safe for human habitation.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine, just, like, the scale of what that pollution actually does to the area, the fact that even the government's like, no, you can't stay there.
Yeah. And so let's talk about some of the human health impacts that are associated with these Superfund sites. So let's start with one interesting fact that you're probably not going to enjoy. 1 in 6 Americans live near a toxic waste site, and it is also divided along racial lines. Surprise, surprise, environmental justice always comes around. Black Americans are 75% more likely to live near waste-producing facilities, and these sites that produce all of this waste than their white counterparts. This is like echoing a legacy of redlining, environmental racism, policy-driven pollution. Because over the years, like, it has been historical that these sites, these places that are affected, like by places like DuPont, for example, that dumped all of that toxic waste into like a farmer's land and into that stream. Like, those people were not predominantly people of color, but they were poor.
Yeah.
They had nothing to stand, like, they had no basis to stand on whenever they're trying to defend themselves. And it's like going back to like the racial thing, like they always take advantage of the people that do not have the advantage already. And
it's like, you see it in Austin too, like they literally built 35 to divide the city racially, and on this side of 35 that we live on, why do you think we have all these industry over here and there's none on the west side? It's because it's predominantly Black and Hispanic people that live over here. And like we even see it just like even in our highways, like it's so much deeper than just like them building a facility. It's like a systemic, almost like campaign to kill us slowly and poison us slowly, so we don't.
Hopefully nobody's watching. Type
yeah,
thing.
exactly. And then if we watch, like, this is where we're at now.
Yeah. So one example is the Hunters Point Naval Shipyard, which is near a historically Black community. So this is a direct quote, so that we made sure that all of this information stayed in here. So this shipyard was used by the U.S. Navy to decontaminate ships after atomic bomb testing in the Pacific during World War II, which led to radioactive isotopes and other hazardous chemicals being spread throughout the site. The shipyard was designated as a Superfund site in 1989. The Navy then contracted with Tetra Tech to remediate the site, which committed fraud in falsifying soil samples in order to avoid fully remediating the site. This fraud resulted in 2 criminal convictions in 2018 and numerous lawsuits filed against Tetra Tech. This is still an ongoing lawsuit, and that's from 1989. Yeah,
this is actively happening into the 2020s.
And I think that that's something that we've mentioned on multiple podcasts, is that this stuff takes time. Like, especially whenever it gets to this extent, like, it's very devastating that it's gone to this extent. But whenever it gets to that extent, like, if there is mass amounts of like pollution in the soil, one of the solutions they have is dig it all up.
Yeah, literally make piles.
Yeah.
They did that in Oklahoma. There's literally a whole town that was super polluted. Like, people would go play in giant piles of this polluted dirt, and like their kids were getting cancer and they had no idea why. And it's because they just left it there.
Yeah.
They just left it there. So if you're falsifying those soil samples, it's very dangerous because the general public is not going to know. Like, that's almost the dangerous thing about science, especially in these cases where you're going into these minority and lower income communities. There's been so much like propaganda. So we do not know, and we're not educated on what's actually happening. And so you're going to trust the people, the scientists that come in, and then when they lie and falsify, in the future, how are you ever supposed to trust science again?
Exactly.
And I also think that's why so many people in these areas like feel hopeless and like feel like a sense of, we've been abandoned. Even if they clean it up, what does it matter?
Yeah. And another sad reality is that the Department of Housing and Urban Development owns, operates, or subsidizes 18,158 properties located within 1 mile of Superfund sites. And the majority of the housing and urban development program tenants are people of color.
Shocker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, if you guys don't know about redlining and specifically the HUD's role in that, they're one of the biggest reasons why we have modern segregation. Like, those racist housing policies set place during like the era of Jim Crow, and they literally use those red line maps in those red areas to decide where to put these facilities, and they're still like, we're still seeing that legacy today in that statistic. It's all so interconnected, and like, I don't know, it just blows my mind how we can go to school and learn these things, but sometimes it's not even, you don't even need a degree to know that this is wrong.
Yeah, like, you could just look at it on a map, and like, if you were to see the plume map of the radius of how it's going to travel, you're going to be like, hey, like, that's literally covering my house. Like, it's not safe, you know? Because it's recommended to avoid living at least 3 to 5 miles from any contaminated site.
Period.
Like, at all. And for those of you who live in small towns, if there's a lot of industry in your town, like, be careful, because just because it's not a Superfund site doesn't mean that they're not, like, exposing you to toxic things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they have pollution. As we've talked, it travels. And so one of the bad things about living close to a Superfund site is that it can lower your life expectancy. And research has showed that adverse health effects are most potent at 1.8 miles away from the site.
Yeah, that's why that 3 to 5 mile radius is so important, because even like 1 mile, 2 miles away, you're still going to be affected.
Mm-hmm. And they can, these substances can cause different health effects, but overall they can cause behavioral abnormalities, cancer, genetic mutations, physiological malfunctions, so your reproductive system can be impaired, you can have kidney failure, you can have physical deformations, and you can also have birth defects. So this is an extreme example, but like Chernobyl would be considered a Superfund site because of all the waste that was like that ended up going into the air.
Yeah.
And we all saw how bad that situation turned out for the people that lived there.
The downwinders.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even just like out in the desert in New Mexico and Arizona, a lot of communities that lived near a lot of these military test sites, after they were done testing the atomic bombs and weapons there, a lot of the people born had these birth defects and physical deformities after they were born because
they had been exposed to so much.
Yeah, and even though they weren't living right there, it traveled enough to affect them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why if we don't emphasize anything, it's that pollution travels. Like, that's like the biggest point that we want to make, is like, even if you think your local community is so safe, and like, even if you do live in a predominantly white area that is wealthy, that doesn't have all these industries, think about the rain, think about your water, think about your soil, think about the air.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything is going to travel to you. Like, you're not going to be insulated just because of privilege.
Yeah. And rain is a really good example. Like, if an industry on the other side of town is polluting into the atmosphere, clouds, as we have all seen, can move, and some of them move really fast depending on the winds and everything. So like, that could land right above you. So it's not like, oh, that's not happening to me, so that's not my problem. It's like, it's happening to all of us. All of us need to be aware of the fact that like pollution is intertwined into our day-to-day lives, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, like, it is. That full stop, it is. And like, the fact that 1 in 6 Americans live near Superfund sites, like, that should terrify us.
Yeah, and like, it actually reminds me, like, I was looking at Superfund sites one time, and of course I was looking at my hometown. They have a Superfund site that was taken off the national priorities list because it was cleaned up. It's right across from a neighborhood.
And I wonder how many people lived there before it was cleaned up.
And I didn't even know a Superfund site until like one of the ladies in town told me that she used to work there, and she was like, "Oh yeah, they closed it down for some reason."
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, but anyways, getting back to the episode. One of the other health concerns is children. So as we've talked in all of our episodes, children are at a severe risk for all types of pollution because their health system and their immune system is not as built up as adults. And 25% of children in the United States live within 2 kilometers of Superfund sites. The children in these areas have higher risks of cancers than adults in non-contaminated areas. Most of these children are exposed to genotoxic carcinogens, meaning that it's going to change your genes. And children also receive greater levels of toxic exposure per kilogram than adults. So, like, proportionally, they're getting exposed to much more than we are.
Yeah, because the surface area of their cells, like, although their cells are smaller, it has a larger surface area. That's a whole fluid mechanic thing. But essentially, like, the smaller size means more can accumulate. Like, that's what you need to understand from that. And it's really sad. And also, kids go outside to play in the dirt. They're going to be playing in the soil, playing in the mud. Because, like, when I was a kid, I would always, like, build and create outside.
I made mud cakes.
Yes, me too. And I would, like, pretend to cook and stuff, and I would just be playing in it. And I'm just like, how many kids have done that, but they're playing in uranium? They're playing in, like,
silver iodide, I don't know.
PCT,
Yeah.
DDT, like, just so many different, because, like, Superfund sites, again, can be any hazardous material. It's not just one class, it could be any of them.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just really worth noting that pollution is going to affect them greater. And, like, we have the numbers in the research to back this. So even if, like, we're not caring for us as adults, we need to think about the children that have been born that don't have a say. And we need to protect them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with that, let's talk about some cleanup efforts. So first, there's a massive research effort being led by the NIEHS, which is a hazardous substance basic research and training program, Superfund research program. That is a mouthful. And it provides practical scientific solutions to help protect the health and environment of the communities. Superfund cleanups often include restoring ecosystems damaged by this pollution or by destroying the contamination. So, ecological revitalization is the process of returning the land from a contaminated state to one that supports a functioning and sustainable habitat. And this most often occurs at sites that anticipate future ecological use. And ecological use and reuse of Superfund sites allows communities to reclaim stolen land. So since Circula has been introduced, we have seen 457 Superfund sites cleaned up, 1,000 recreational uses, including protected parklands and athletic fields, implemented, 1,900 ecological uses. We've seen 58 endangered and threatened species protected. We've had 41 habitats constructed and 915 creeks, rivers, and streams cleaned. So there's genuinely been extensive effort, but as the EPA notes, this is not enough. We have 350,000 potential sites in the next 10 years that are going to need remediation. So that means that us as communities are going to have to band together to help them.
Yeah. And I think that it starts by figuring out what is affecting your community. Because, like, if there's going to be 350,000 people, different sites on that list, that's like almost every site in the United States. Like, let that sink in. Like, that the magnitude of how many sites that is, like, that is going to span the entire United States with toxic waste of different kinds.
That need to be cleaned. Because when sites need remediation, that means it's affecting the ecosystem. It's going to be affecting the people that live there. It's not just going to be isolated.
And I think that that's something, like, we haven't talked about this before, but there was one incident whenever we were in college about somebody who worked at a consulting firm said that they wouldn't waste their money on environmental cleanup and those costs because it was a waste of time. And I think that is important for me to bring that up because that perspective is still
relevant.
Yeah, people still hold that perspective. Like, hey, I don't care about the environment because it's going to cost extra money or it's going to be this or that.
Or it's like a nuisance almost.
Yeah.
Just to give preface, we were literally in a talk, like in our mentor group, and we were meeting with a lady, another woman engineer that owned her company. And we were sitting there bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, so excited to work with this woman. And I asked her, like, did I ask, would you ever hire an environmental engineer? And that was her response, and everyone laughed. And me and Kim were sitting there, the only environmental engineers in the room, like, this is how we're valued. And seeing those numbers was very jarring, the 350,000, because I went back to that time and I was just like, not only are we fighting a war to like remediate these areas, not a war, that's over dramatic, but like we're fighting a battle to remediate these areas, but we also have to change the minds of the public. And if that's an engineer who knows these things, who has this background, how will the general public face like this insurmountable task?
And I think that that's why, you know, like, we don't, we obviously don't want to leave you on, like, a sad note. So, like, it's very important for us to note that, like, all of this, like, all of these issues, they are a reason why we started Sauce and Solutions. They are a reason why we're here trying to provide education to y'all. Like, to be honest, we are both exhausted.
Yeah, we're burnt out, brother. But we know that if we do not give this free information, how will the public know? And how will they have it in a way that is palatable and not so verbose that you're just like, I don't know what the heck they're talking about?
Yeah. So, like, we just want you to know, like, we're, at the end of the day, like, our viewers, our listeners, like, you're very important to us, and we hope that you are learning something from us, and we hope that you continue to come back.